Hello everyone, Pulse here, and welcome to the first post-launch episode of Delving Deep ESO, or to be truthful, the first episode of the Delving Deep ESO podcast. Now, to be honest with you guys, the name is a work in progress. I actually wanted to do something completely new, something fresh, start new with the launch of the game, but I couldn't. I don't know why, but I couldn't find anything really interesting that hadn't been taken already, to be honest, like a play on words, any of that kind of stuff that I was thinking of. I just couldn't think of anything. So I'm actually going to leave the name of the podcast to you guys. I'm going to leave it in the hands of the community. Post your ideas in the comments, send them to my YouTube inbox, and whomever puts the best suggestion will kind of take the cake, as it were. They're going to get the name applied to the podcast going forward. I'll make sure to give a shout out to you for being such a badass at naming stuff. And like I said, the name will stick to the podcast going forward. Now, as for the content of today's show, we're going to start out by getting into my gameplay experiences so far. We're going to talk about ESO's launch and how that went over, and also there's some more info about adventure zones that we need to talk about. So let's get into it, shall we? So to start the gameplay, right out of the gate, I ran into a wall, which was deciding what I was going to play. I had such a hard time deciding the final week leading up to the early access launch, and when I'm sitting there at the character creation, I couldn't pick. I really couldn't pick. So I kind of just sat there for a little bit, thought it over, and I really just went with my gut, and it told me play the class that you hadn't played during beta. So right now I'm playing a Dragon Knight. Now, because of work and a wedding and some other schedule stuff, my playtime wasn't quite as high as I would have liked, but I'm on my way towards being level 23 with my Breton flame-slinging Dragon Knight. Now, for this character, at the moment I've decided to go all-out pyromaniac with little to no regard for my own safety, so I've committed 100%, all of my trait points are into Magicka. I'm now in full light armor, taking advantage of my Breton passives as well as the light armor passives to the Magicka and stuff like that, and I'm really focused on the Ardent Flame skill line. Now obviously I'm picking and choosing from the other skill lines as I go, but really my mentality thus far has been fire, fire everywhere, just spamming the hell out of my fire skills, be it my Flame Breath or my Lava Whip. Really good time just burning shit, honestly. It's really good time going crazy with the fire spam. Now, throughout my gameplay, getting to level 23, obviously I've done a good bit of questing. I've run through Glenumbra and the second zone, Stormhaven. Now, through my questing experiences, I think this is just a MMO mentality thing getting in the way, but I'm having trouble finding quests, and I'm going through my adventure, and I'm realizing now that I've hit, like I said, the 22, 23 level area, that I need to really go back and explore, get into the Elder Scrolls mentality. You can't just go from one quest to the next quest and just be okay, because the whole time I've been questing, pretty much since I would say the latter half of Glenumbra, I've been doing quests that are 4 levels beyond me, and they're doable, mind you, but there's some of these boss style instances where you fight these like bosses that have mechanics and damage output that will just wreck you if you're not prepared. And there's been a couple instances where I've had to group up to get those done. And I'm realizing now that if you're playing this game, you really need to put yourself in a mindset that sits in between MMO and Elder Scrolls. You want to talk to all the NPCs, you want to make sure you hit all of the zones and go to all the points of interest on the map so you can get all of the story and all of the experiences, as well as all the sky shards. I know for a fact I've missed a buttload of sky shards on my adventures through the first 2 zones, so I'm definitely going to go back and do those. Now, outside of my questing experiences, I've done a couple dungeons as well, and I'm finding very quickly now that the early access, the 3-day window, and then the official launch have come out, there's a lot of new players, and a lot of these players are coming from previous MMOs and are having a hard time realizing the flexibility of the skill line system, and also having a hard time grasping how groups should function in ESO. Tanks in particular, from my experiences, I seem to have the most trouble understanding that ESO doesn't have typical aggro mechanics they're not even close to the same as something like WoW, for example. You can't have all these like AoE taunts, like single taunts in this game. There's only 2, or 3 tops. And I'm hoping that in time people will come to realize that Elder Scrolls Online plays like Guild Wars 2, but more like what Guild Wars 2 should have played like. Tanks and healers are supporting roles in this game, while damage dealers bring the pain, but it's not so black and white either. DPS needs to watch themselves. You have to come prepared with tons of CC and skills to keep you alive, items as well to keep you alive, bring those potions and things like that to help the group as a whole. I mean, even at the lowest level dungeon, so we'll talk about Spindle Clutch really quick, for example. That's the lowest level dungeon in the Daggerfall Covenant, and you'll find very quickly that even in that very basic dungeon, where 2/3 of it is, or more than that honestly, is just run through the mobs, run through the group, kill them, move on to the next thing. The strategy is very minimal, but you'll see very quickly that if 1 or 2 of the people you're in the group with aren't playing with a group mentality, things will go downhill very, very quickly. These dungeons, and this game in general, requires synergy, timing, and awareness, and it's really important to ESO and how it functions. And I must admit that I love that aspect of this game very, very much. It sounds kind of weird coming from my own mouth, hearing myself sing, because I am a DPS nut at heart, honestly. I build myself in every game. I try to play the other roles, and I enjoy them, mind you, but every time my go-to character is always like a crazy DPS-driven kind of character. But the systems in place here, they just work. They force teamwork, they force communication and coordination, and it really makes a difficult boss kill or completing a particular challenge really, really rewarding when you're able to pull it off. It's really, really cool that the way they've done this. I'm seeing that a lot of these new players are coming into the game from other genres or from previous MMO experiences, and they're just not quite grasping it. I'm hoping that's a thing that sets in very quickly, because it is really frustrating, to the point that the other night I was telling some of my guildies that I might just, after I level up a little bit more with my flame-driven Dragonite, I might just commit to being a tank, because it was driving me insane how important it was for the tank to play his role, but none of them I could find could do it. Maybe 2 out of like the 12 times I've run a dungeon was the tank really on point and made sure to bring the proper CCs and proper skill setup, and were on their game for actually driving the group forward as the tank. I mean, it's a big thing. I hope we'll get fixed. One last thing on dungeons before I move on, because I know I'm going to be asked about it, and that is doing dungeon guides on this game. And to be frank, I was going to do them. I definitely was planning on doing it, but going through the lower level dungeons, I simply don't see a need for them, honestly. The mechanics in place are pretty straightforward, to the point that explanation isn't really required. I mean, if I was to make it a video on Spindle Clutch, for example, because we were talking about that one, it's the one full of spiders, and basically I would just say skip the first 2/3 of this video, because it's nothing but kill the spider groups, kill the boss, kill some more spider groups, kill the second boss, and then you'd hit the latter third of the dungeon. And at that point, I would just say synchronize AoEs and CCs on the large groups while making sure to focus down healers. And then on the final boss, stay out of the big AoE that she pulls out, because it will kill you, even if you're in heavy armor most of the time. And there you go, like a minute video basically. And that's not really my thing. I'd rather get into some worthwhile discussion on the video, or for a dungeon video rather. So unless I see some encounters that require the explanation, I'm not going to do one. So I would expect some dungeon guides for the later stuff, in particular the veteran guides. Expect that kind of thing, but right now I'm not having anything that I've come across that really warrants talking about the dungeons. So that's kind of a here or there kind of thing, depending on what I see in the actual dungeons themselves. But that's basically my gameplay experience so far. I'm just a level 23 Breton Dragonite going crazy with fire and having a good time so far. The dungeons have been giving me a little bit of a trouble, mainly because of people coming from their past MMO experiences and not quite grasping the systems. Hopefully that'll get ironed out as we go. But let's get into the news section of the podcast. The first bit will be about the launch. So how did the launch go? Well, the 5-day early access, really smooth for me. Easily the best experience I've had from a new MMO in a long time. Very few bugs, and even the ones that I did encounter usually were rectified with a quick relog of the character. In some cases having to get out of the game entirely and log back in. But very few bugs, to be honest with you. Very few issues I had during the 5-day early access period. And even the ones that weren't fixed straight away, some quests that I did come across, they just couldn't be fixed. They did require some hot fixing. And the devs were really on top of that as well, from what I could tell. Everything was going smooth. Everything was really, really good. And I'm sure you've seen this reported on multiple other channels and other websites and stuff, that the 5-day early access went smooth as hell. Then the 3-day access kicked in, and all number of crazy things kicked in, most of which didn't happen to me, but there are reports of people having, like, accidentally getting logged into another person's account. I mean, I don't even know how the hell that happens. There's issues where characters were being reset to earlier levels and quests, so in some cases people were losing like a level's worth of experience and quest gain, where others were losing many hours, like 10 levels worth, which is a huge amount of time in this game for sure. There were some huge amount of server downtime issues that had to come into play to kind of rectify some of the errors. And speaking of errors, that's one of the things I did come across in spades, really. So was just kind of random timing crashes that were kicking me out of the game. And I mean, it didn't hugely impact my gameplay, to be honest with you, a quick relog, but man, it was really annoying as piss in some instances. I had a couple that happened during dungeons, so we'd have to wipe and then start over if it was really out of hand for them, and that kind of thing. And then comes the official launch. Now, the issues from the 3-day access had slowed down a good bit because they did take the servers offline for a really long time. I think it was like 12 hours or something like that during the 3-day period. But at that point, then other issues came into play, right? So the issues that came from the 3-day access period are kind of ironed out, right? Then we have the official launch come in, and just this huge influx of players, and it changed the game for me in those lower level areas, because even though I had out leveled them some, as I was saying earlier, I needed to go back and kind of look for the sky shards and get into a Elder Scrolls mentality so I could go and pick and choose some other quests that maybe I had missed. And while I was there, I was also going to some of the points of interest that I hadn't gone to, and it was immediately jarring. We'd go through the area, for example, during the 5-day access. There was a couple people, it felt more like beta during the 5-day and even the 3-day access as well. During that official launch, once that hit, those points of interest and public dungeons, for example, I'd normally run to 1 to 2 people during the early access. Once the official launch hit, it was insane. You'd go in there, there'd be like 10 to 20 people in there. They'd just rush through the event or run through the public dungeon and just wreck the whole thing. Zero challenge. A lot of times you'd have to rush to even get a hit off on the boss at the end of the public dungeon to get credit for doing it. If not, you'd have to wait for a respawn. And it was a really odd feeling, and just really crazy, because I had gone through the game in the early access and in beta, and it was a totally different experience. Now, I'm well aware that once this launch, like another week from now, probably 2 weeks maybe, we're going to start seeing the launch crowd spread out a little bit more. So that issue's kind of died down a little bit, but man, it was really jarring. Now, outside of that stuff, really, I think the launch has gone pretty smooth. I mean, the only real issue that I see that's like just really jarring and really out of place is the account mix-up and the very rare like reset where it took you back many hours of gameplay. Those are really the only things that shouldn't have occurred during the launch, but even still, this has got to be one of the smoothest launches in a really long time coming from an MMO. Could it have been better? Definitely could have been better. It can always be better for sure, but I would have to give props to Zenimax because I think they did a pretty damn good job of handling the launch of Elder Scrolls Online. Now, the second bit of news to talk about is Adventure Zone Craglorn, which they've announced is going to be released before the end of April. And they also put out a little video which gets into some things that they kind of glossed over before. It gives us a little bit more information about the thing. So the first thing is, this is going to start out, the difficulty is going to be at Veteran Rank 10 baseline. Obviously, there's going to be bosses and stuff therein, so it's going to get even more difficult. But Craglorn is serious business by the sounds of it. You want to go in prepared. Now, Craglorn's going to be filled with a main story, which is going to kind of be this one and done thing, right? You're going to do the quest line. It's going to take you throughout the zone. You're going to get this large overarching story, which by the sounds is related to like a constellation of stars and some other things like that. But also, there's going to be some repeatable quests that kind of happen out in the world in a more natural state, and they sound kind of like group dailies. I'm not too keen on dailies, but if these are really, really well done, I'll have to give them a look and see. I don't know. I'm done with dailies. I've been done with dailies for a long time now, so I'm not sure how I feel about group dailies. So we'll have to wait and see. But who knows? Maybe doing dailies in a group will help the monotony kind of die down a little bit. The other stuff that we got into was that there's a main city named Belkarth, and I wanted to bring this up because during the portion of the video where he mentions it, he says that you can set up a group here, and I'm hoping we get some clarification on this, because before, the way that they like use the terminology describing the Craglorn Adventure Zone, it made it sound like the whole Adventure Zone was instanced off for your group. But now the way that he said it in this video, it makes it sound like Adventure Zone Craglorn is going to be open to everyone, just like every other zone. So you'll be able to do the content. It's going to be scaled up to having a group of 4, for example, but there's nothing being said that you won't like run into a second group, for example. So you can go in with 2 groups of 4. Like maybe you've got a bunch of guildies in and you want to get your 12-man dungeon for the trials. We'll just put it at that, right? You've got your 3 4-man groups and you're running through the main story and you're doing some of the repeatable quests too, maybe on your way through Craglorn. That there's nothing to restrict you from doing so by the sounds. The only thing that will be restricted by the sounds of it is the delves, which is the public dungeons they've talked about before, and that's supposed to be instance off for your group. So by the sounds of it, the Craglorn Adventure Zone is actually going to be open to everyone. So if you want to go out there with no group and get slaughtered, you can do so, I guess. But there's going to be this main city, Belkarth, where you can set up groups for going out and doing the adventure, doing the story and stuff like that. And then once you hit these delves, then it will be instance off. Or when you hit these points of interest, they will also be instance off. Now, talking about the points of interest, they made sure to talk about the fact that they are way more difficult than in the overworld. They're going to be closer to doing veteran dungeons in terms of difficulty. And again, they will be instance off just like the delves, the public dungeons. And then finally, they were talking about the trials. I'm very, very happy to hear that they are actually going to be in with adventure zones when they go all at once, because I was convinced that they were going to be separate things. Like they'd release Craglorn, the adventure zone, and we'd get the points of interest and the dungeons and the delves and all that good stuff, but the trials were going to come at a later date. But by the sounds, we're going to be getting it before the end of April alongside this patch, which is really, really cool. Now, for those who don't know, trials are the 12-man dungeon or raid content in Elder Scrolls, which are going to use the Soul Reservoir mechanic, aka limited respawns, and it's also going to be timed so that your guild and your group are on a leaderboard. And if you do well on that leaderboard, you will then be rewarded, your guild and your group, with some interesting and rare loot rewards. Now, I definitely recommend taking a look at the official video trailer for Craglorn that Zenimax put out on their website, because I have to say, watching this thing, the bosses look really impressive. The destructive power they seem to wield is visually stunning, and I can't wait to see how these visuals translate into raid style mechanics. It's got me really, really pumped up to try that stuff. I'm a raider at heart all day, so I'm really, really excited to try this content out. And again, I'm really relieved that they're putting the trials into the Adventure Zone patch at the end of the month. Just really, really cool. I'm convinced at this point that the trials were going to come in later. Nope, we're getting it straight away. So kudos to Zenimax, because in the previous video that I made about the Adventure Zones, I was really just driving home the idea that they need to get this out within a couple weeks of launch, and that's exactly what they're doing. So I'm really, really happy. And yeah, I think that's going to cover it for the Adventure Zone. There's not a lot of information from that video, but it was really cool that they've come out and officially announced that it will be out before the end of the month. But that will wrap up the news portion of the show. Next up is the questions and statements from the community. or at least it will be in the future. Basically, what I want to do is very typical podcast kind of formatting here. Towards the end of the show, going to get some viewer submitted questions and concerns and all that good stuff and tackle those each week. Written questions can be put in the comments below or sent to my YouTube inbox. Recorded audio questions can be sent to my YouTube inbox as well, and I'll play those during the show. And then also I will be up for doing video questions if you want to do that kind of thing, which at that point what you'd want to do, video questions and gameplay I should say, you'll want to submit them to YouTube and put it on as a video response to this video, and I will integrate all that stuff into future podcasts. So at this point, let the floodgates open up. Ask any question you can think of pertaining to Elder Scrolls Online, and I will definitely put it in future podcasts. Also, if you're interested in being a guest on future podcasts, make sure to send a message to my YouTube inbox. Make sure to label it that you want to be a guest on the podcast, and I will get in touch with you and see what we can do about getting the discussion going between us, because I'm really excited to do that kind of thing. I want to get the community involved with the content I have for a while. So I want the ESO podcast to kind of be the first foray into that kind of thing. So definitely get in touch with me for that kind of thing. Trying to think if there's anything else of importance here. I don't think so. Basically just want to say, if you're interested in joining up or submitting questions, don't hesitate. Make sure to get in contact with me through the comments, through my YouTube inbox, that kind of thing, and we'll go forward with future podcasts, getting the community involved, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the best part of delving deep into a podcast. But that will bring me to the end of it. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and listening as well, because this is a podcast. And thanks for the support provided for the channel. It's really, really exciting to see the channel grow, and I'm working on some pretty exciting stuff at the moment as well. And it's all because of you guys that I'm really driven to keep producing more content. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave a comment down below. Make sure to send your questions, inquire about being on the podcast, and also submit your gameplay for future podcasts. At the moment, I tend for this production to be a weekly thing, but life is pretty damn crazy, so no guarantees. But at the moment, let's just say that the ESO podcast will be a once-a-week production. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks again for watching. Bye.